Electromagnetic radiation and what industry and its supporters are not telling you. Lying in the MRI for an hour waiting for the scans to complete to see what the remnants in the acoustic aroma were doing, I had time to think about a few of the things the industry is not telling the people about electromagnetic radiation. Electromagnetic radiation harms all people, all flora, and all fauna. And oh yes, the remnant of my tumor is shrinking, but it's still difficult to accept more radiation to see what the first blast of radiation did to you. One of the first things that I'd like to talk about is near-field radiation. Usually radio energy is used in the far-field zones, typically greater than 2 meters from the transmitting antenna. What they do not discuss is the effects that occur within the near field. Cell phones and iPads are virtually always operated within the near field zone. One seldom operates a laptop more than 2 meters away from their bodies, and Wi-Fi routers and access points are scattered around, often within 2 meters of people, many of whom are not even using or want the Wi-Fi network. Why are the special conditions within the near field important to be aware of? One of the things in the near field zone is spectacular peaks of radiation which occur in the near field zone. According to Industry Canada, these spectacular peaks can be up to 10 times the average predicted intensity of radiation. Dr. Robert Kane, in his book Cellular Telephones, Russian Roulette, says the peaks can be up to 100 times the intensity. Dr. Kane was a senior radio frequency engineer for Motorola until shortly before his death of brain cancer. He also successfully sued Motorola for causing his brain cancer. At 10 times the intensity of most cell phones and cordless phones are close to exceeding the Canadian Safety Code. At 100 times, the limits are clearly exceeded by a considerable amount. Micropulses versus continuous radiation. One's microwave oven operates as a continuous emitting device. Cell phones, cordless phones, especially the DECT, smart meters, routers, and most personal communication devices, as well as radar, are examples of units operating with micropulses. A micropulse is a pulse that lasts for a thousandth of a second. Typically, the units use a number of micropulses, such as a pulse of 50 microseconds or 1/20th of a second. The full calculation is complex, but in basic terms, if a device is emitting 1 micropulse, a microwatt per square centimeter for 50 microseconds, then the peak emission is 20 microwatts per square centimeter. What's the difference? Well, think in terms of a bullet fired from a gun. Assuming that the time the bullet hits the skin is a microsecond. Of course, the bullet can be expected to penetrate the skin and do its thing. Average the force of the bullet over a long enough period of time, and it will do no harm, not even cause a bruise. Of course, when one gets shot, they do not have the option of spreading the bullet force over a period of time. All the force is concentrated into a fraction of a second. Telling us that a micropulse of radiation cannot hurt us is silly. It's telling us we cannot be hurt by a bullet fired from a gun. Calculating the total exposure in a day from repeated micropulses and declaring no harm is possible is foolish as well. Microwave radiation is non-ionizing and therefore cannot harm you. One of industry's most illogical lines. Of course microwave radiation can harm you. Ship's radar techs tell me that many ships' radars, they can track a seagull at 500 meters and literally cook it in a few seconds while it is in flight. My personal experience of being hit with intense microwave beam and the instant heating and long-term issues caused is another example of the harm they can do. All know microwave radiation can cause harm to living tissues. The only discussion is how little radiation will cause harm. Some scientists, such as Dr. Otto Johansson and others on the Salton scientific panel, find, based on power density measurements, sufficient evidence for whole body scientific benchmark for adverse effects exists down to 0.017 microwatts per square centimeter. Knocking ions off of molecules and atoms is not the only way a cell can be harmed or even heated. We have all felt the heat from a wood fire. Does anyone think that the fire is knocking ions off of one's flesh? Of course not. Harm can only occur to a cell if it is heated for 6 minutes. Obviously, another dumb position to take. The Canadian Safety Code and other comparable codes from countries such as the US, all part of the one should have a big daily dose of EMF community of nations, in their infinite wisdom have decided that unless radiation is sufficient to raise the temperature 1 to 2 degrees Celsius within 6 minutes, no harm is done. Check this silly out for yourself. Take a large cell, otherwise known as an egg, place it in boiling water for 3 minutes, then open the egg. Well, the egg may be cooked just right, the way you like it, but in terms of the cell, it is certainly been materially changed, and logically one knows that had the egg been cooked at a lower temperature for a shorter period of time, the viability of the egg would still have been compromised. Radiation is an energy wave. Well, that's true in part, but not the whole story. Energy at times is considered to be particles, called photons. Energy at times acts as though it is waves, and other times as particles. This is discussed in the wave-particle duality theory, a complex discussion that includes luminaries of science such as Maxwell Planck and Albert Einstein. To have a glimpse of what this discussion is all about, think of sand dunes in a desert where what are clearly particles blown by the sand jet at times form waves or rolling dunes across the desert. Radio frequency is not to be treated as a Group 2B carcinogen. A curious revision of science by WorkSafe BC and others. The IARC, the agency that classifies carcinogens, monographs identify environmental factors that can increase the risk of human cancer. These include chemicals, complex mixtures, occupational exposures, physical agents and biological agents, and lifestyle factors. The Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety is a federal government agency and defines physical agents as sources of energy that may cause injury or disease. Examples include noise, vibration, radiation, and extremes in temperature or pressure. WorkSafe BC and others also refuse to accept that photons are a substance and with a proven record of affecting cells. It is therefore also a biological agent and covered by the IARC classification. Radio frequency is classified in the same category as coffee. Yes, although the IARC classifies coffee, it does so with a bit of a subcondition, noting its association with a particular cancer. Coffee is also the biggest source of antioxidants for most people. Antioxidants are known to have significant health benefits and are often cited for their cancer reduction association. EMF is not noted to have such comparable health benefits. One has the option of drinking coffee. We do not have the option of refusing EMF, which is emitted into the environment and cannot be avoided. Everyone is exposed to it. Other tasty snacks that are classified in the Group 2B carcinogens include styrene and lead. Are lead-based paints commonly used or even available? Despite much howling from the automobile and petroleum industry, lead was removed from gasoline because of its known health concerns. There are thousands of scientific papers that show microwave radiation is safe. Interesting that there are so few of these that have been made available to the public. And the ones that usually do appear are usually full of a variety of scientific errors, procedural flaws, and are usually by or led by a scientist with well-known connections to industry or sometimes funded third party to obscure the source by industry. Of the purported thousands of documents, would it be too much to ask for 10% of these documents to be shown to the public? If there are thousands of documents, then there is a minimum of 2,000 documents. If the documents exist, releasing 200 of them should not be a difficult challenge to meet. Recently, the Provincial Medical Health Officer at BC was given 160 documents establishing proof that cell phone class radiation, which is often cited as comparable to the radiation from smart meters, can cause biological problems. He decided They did nothing to change his view that microwave radiation was safe. What peer-reviewed published articles is he basing his opinion on? Is his opinion based on science or just his own personal, uninformed bias? The same collection of biases that WorkSafe BC has when they are presented with a claim for injury caused by microwave radiation. BC Hydro seems to be taking a similar position regarding their smart meters. Are their positions based on science or just their own bias and to promote their own agenda? The Ministry of Energy in BC, Rich Coleman, well, one should not challenge him to think, especially in terms of proven science and logic. Ideological biases appear to be the driving force for his logic and reasoning.